sustain this rate of growth. Earth just can't handle it. We're already consuming resources at 150% capacity. Something has to give and give soon. And the cause of this problem can be laid at least partially at the feet of religion and its unsupportable positions on when life begins, reproductive rights, environmental controls, as well as the general distrust of science. Now, of course, I'm not saying anything most of you have heard before. The less familiar argument I want to emphasize is that powerful corporate interests are using religion to cast doubt upon the work of climate scientists and others who are warning us about the dangers ahead. This is dirty politics, not legitimate scientific debate. The role of religion in climate change denialism is not widely appreciated. However, the same people who are promoting creationism are involved in global warming denialism. Let me give one example. The Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation has issued what they call an evangelical declaration on global warming. Allow me to quote from that declaration. Quote, "We believe that Earth and its ecosystems, created by God's intelligent design and infinite power, and sustained by his faithful providence, are robust, resilient, self-regulating, and self-correcting, admirably suited for human flourishing and displaying his glory. We deny that Earth and its ecosystems are the fragile and unstable products of chance, and particularly that Earth's climate system is vulnerable to dangerous alteration because of minuscule changes in atmospheric energy. In other words, trust in God. He won't let us destroy life on Earth." Could there be any better example of the folly of faith? The statement I just read was signed by over 500 evangelicals, including many prominent preachers and theologians. If you are wondering what the connection is between the opposition to evolution and global warming denialism, or the opposition to global warming, they both describe a world that is constantly changing, while the Bible and Christian tradition describe a world that is unchanging, at least until Jesus returns. In conclusion, it's time for scientists and other rationalists to join together, put a stop to those who claim they have some sacred right to decide what kind of society the rest of us must live in. We must act for the sake of the betterment of humankind and the future of our planet. Now, based on favorable signs that young people are increasingly abandoning religion, I have hoped that perhaps in another generation, maybe two, America will have joined Europe and the rest of the developed world in casting off the rusty chains of ancient superstition that stands as an impediment to science and progress. I just hope it's not too late. Thank you very much. Okay, well, we're going to have questions. I'll call on people and wait for the mic.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to try to formulate this well, but especially the last few minutes here in your talk, when you were speaking of the timetables of one generation or two generations and the trends of religiosity among American youth, and extrapolating what the timeframes are like for how sustainable our lifestyles are, and the need for progress on those fronts. My question is about what can be done to accelerate this progress, because like I said, I'm going to try to be concise here. Here's the problem that I have with new atheism in general, is to me it feels like a conservative Christian walking into a high school classroom and preaching abstinence only. that it's just a fact that teenagers are going to be having sex, just like it's a fact that people are going to be believing crazy things that they're going to cling to, and it just feels like there needs to be some movement to work within the parameters of people's nature, as opposed to just saying you've got to shove the whole thing and let go of all of it and have an abstinence-only approach to religious faith.
So you think you're saying that atheism is proposing something similar, something that's not going to
that's what it feels like to me.
happen because
It's just too extreme. It's just too confronting.
Yeah.
That even if it's right,
but I think that the answer to that is it's working.
Okay.
It's really beginning to work. The number of people who go to church, who belong to religious groups has fallen, is rising steadily. 15% now, 28% among young people, ages 18 to 29, I believe they're range. You have Europe, you have the example of Europe. 5% of people who live in Denmark go to church. And so there are all kinds of statistics like that lead me to hope that just by keeping up the pressure, and I think that the point that I try to stick to is the intellectual arguments. This last part of my talk is basically saying why it's important, but the message is the intellectual arguments, and I have no problem with getting into nice discussions with believers on these issues, as long as we keep it at an even plane. But the point is that they're making statements that are wrong. When they say that the universe had to be created, the universe can't be eternal, that the universe is fine-tuned, these are things I know a lot about, as a physicist, cosmologist. I can argue with them. I didn't talk all about quantum mechanics, but quantum mechanics is another thing I've written 2 books about the false use of quantum mechanics to claim that we can make our own reality just by thinking about it. Well, quantum mechanics doesn't say that at all. So it's an educational process, and that's the small role that I play. I'm certainly not the most influential person out there. But I'm just about the only physicist who's addressing these issues, and I think that it gives me my own little niche. So that's the area where I'm. Another question? Right next to you.
It's okay for me. I don't want to comment. Right? But yeah, it seems like to me there's 2 different dichotomies on evolution on whether or not it has a purpose or not. There's the Stephen Jay Gould camp that says evolution has no purpose, no direction, nothing it wants or is trying for. Then there's more the transhumanist camp that says evolution or survival is better, more complexity is better, and evolution wants that and is pushing towards that. Where do you follow on that extreme?
Well, I think from what I know, again, I'm not field of the people in the audience who probably answer this question more authoritatively, but as far as I know, there's only one among the great overwhelming majority of evolutionary biologists who agree with Stephen Jay Gould that there's no evidence for purpose, that it's just random changes in random mutations and the way. So that natural selection is kind of a bad term because it sort of suggests there's some law of natural selection out there, some universal law that's in operation. Well, it's just a sifting process. That's all it is. It's just a sifting process that has no lawful behavior at all. It's just some things go one way, but some other things go another way. That's just the way it works. So, any evolutionists want to comment, or even anti-evolutionists want to comment? You're welcome to grab the mic right now.
Just real quick.
We're
fortunate to have in the audience Dr. Daniel Fairbanks, who's a distinguished evolutionary biologist.
Yeah, essentially the idea of it's a misnomer to say that evolution or that mutations are random, but also incorrect to say that they're random. For instance, mutations, certain chemical types of mutations, transitions as opposed to transversions, I won't take the time to explain what those are more likely. So certain types of mutations in certain places are more likely, therefore there is some predictability. to evolution, but that does not mean that it is guided. That's the difference that we have to see in this. Is that there's no scientific evidence that indicating any kind of intelligent direction or guidance in where evolution is going.
Well, there is this Simon Conway Morris notion that of convergent evolution, that humans would evolve regardless. Basically, he's trying to say. Now, I find that pretty hard to believe, since there's been a billion or 10 billion species, and only one became human, so certainly wasn't very convergent for them.
Well, if that were the case, we should see the same species evolving over and over and over, which of course.
So they use the eye as an example, but the eye evolved 20 different ways, 20 different times. So,
well, that's it. We do see certain structures that continue to evolve independently as a consequence of the same selective pressures directing toward that. But they're not genetically. Some of them actually are genetically similar, but others are very different mechanisms that lead to the same
yeah, I like to use, as a physicist, I like to get back to basics, and there's only one way that a photon particle of light gets detected. Only one way. And that's by hitting an electron in an atom and knocking it to a higher energy level, or knocking it out of the atom. That's it. That's the only mechanism, only one mechanism. So any evolutionary process that's going to lead to fission is going to have that as the final mechanism by which the signal is generated by a photon. Anyway, let's go to another question. Why are you standing?
All right, I'm an atheist, and as a current BYU student, it's really nice to be able to admit that. So my question is one that you kind of touched on in your speech. You mentioned the very low proportion of theists who are in the scientific body, and of course down south we see this a lot in our faculty at Brigham Young University. Why is it that people who are so well trained in critical thinking methodologies in the fields are still prone to abandon that type of critical thinking when it comes to theistic topics?
Well, first of all, most of them probably were raised in a particular faith. And so they're used to it. They like it. They see benefits for themselves, and social benefits certainly of going to church. And so how much they actually believe of the official teachings is something that you can question. I talk to an awful lot of them who just go to church because for that reason. They've always gone to church, and they think there's some merit to it, but they don't really ask those questions. As what I talked about, the compartmentalization that takes place. I think what they do is they have this training in critical thinking skills, and they just don't apply it to religion. It's just not that part of the brain. One part of the brain that's religious, the other part of the brain that's scientific, and they just don't talk to each other. Maybe one is the left brain, one is the right brain, I don't know. Yes.
I came in a little late. I'm wondering, did you cover the entropic principle at all? And if not, what do you have to say about that?
Could you,
The entropic principle?
yeah, the entropic principle is fine tuning, is a better term for it. The argument for fine tuning that the universe is the constants of physics are finely tuned so that without this fine tuning life would not evolve. And that's actually true. Life as we know it, our kind of life, would not exist if there were some changes in those constants. But that was what my last book was about, the fallacy of fine tuning. Now, it's got a lot of math in it, because I wanted to show that I wasn't just waving my arms in this argument, that I could quantitatively show the reason that certain constants have the values they do. And I've gone through pretty much all the important ones that people have mentioned and shown that there's no reason